All right. So you were talking about how Ananda kind of, as he was laying down, in fact, as the story is that as he was laying down, he had that really deep insight into there is no future, it's only right now. And by the time his head hit the pillow, he'd gotten it all figured out. He had all the pieces. Now, this happens to a lot of people that they know a whole lot of Dhamma and they're making good progress. I've seen this, in fact, in senior monks in Thailand, and that the monk will say something like, "Oh, well, I've got everything ready so that in the next life I'll become enlightened." And then it's shocking to him to realize that that next life is right now. And then he could just put it all together and get her done. And but the bigger problem for most people is that because they believe in things that don't exist, like believing off into a future. Um, the example would be like Pure Land. You probably heard about the Pure Land, where some monk named Amitabha or Amito Buddha or Maitri or something like that is going to make things good enough so that your practice is easy. That's the whole philosophy behind the Pure Land. Well, if some monk by the name maybe of Ajahn Maitri can come by and say, it's pure enough right now, then people can practice correctly. But it's all off into the future. And so most people in Thailand have the idea that, oh, well, I can't do it in this life. All I can do is make merit so that the next life I'll be in a land that's pure enough where I can practice. And so they don't practice at all and they get no skills at all. They postpone it and postpone it and postpone it. And the best they can come up with is a little bit of merit, but they still are angry and frustrated and all of that kind of stuff. And they haven't really developed any skills. So we wind up with the possibility that when people believe in rebirth, they don't develop any skills at all. Or they believe in rebirth, but they also believe in the teachings of the Buddha. They practice the teachings of the Buddha, and they almost make it because they've got uh, the skills developed, like being a monk for 20 years and doing all of that, and still believing that I have to wait until the next life. That's the guy that could get it just like Ananda did. But the guys who don't practice at all are the ones that, even if they do figure it out, now they have to start the path. And so it's possible then for, let us call somebody an atheist. And by the way, most atheists still believe in a whole lot of magic. They may not believe in a particular kind of magic, like the kind of God that Christians believe in. They may be agnostic or atheist to that, but they still have a whole lot of magical beliefs. Like if I get a raise, I'll be happy. All right. And so when they, in that regard, they don't have to believe in rebirth, but they have an awful lot of other magical beliefs that prevent them from even starting to practice. And so you have all four elements there. They can believe in rebirth and reincarnation and get nowhere, or they can believe in rebirth and reincarnation and be almost ready, or they can not believe in rebirth and reincarnation and get nowhere, or they can practice correctly and then get it. So those are the four things. But in every case, the person has to give up on the future. And if he gives up early, his practice is easier. Because when you believe in rebirth and reincarnation, your good practice is kind of haphazard.
Right. So we're making this distinction here, it seems like, that it's not that we are saying this exists or doesn't exist. We're saying the belief and attachment to that concept.
The belief and the attachment to. The reality is that we don't know.
Yeah.
But the likelihood based upon modern physics, and this modern physics is just an attitude all the way back to the Buddha. There was no evidence at all that rebirth and reincarnation existed. If you've got no evidence, think about going into court. Can the prosecutor go into court and blame a victim or blame a defendant and have absolutely no evidence? He's unlikely to get a conviction. Or if the prosecutor goes into court with evidence and the defendant has no evidence at all to defend himself. And so the reality is, and this is something that has been said by Christianity, they use the example, or they use the phrase rather, absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. What? Well, of course, absence of evidence is clear evidence of absence. If you go for not just a day or two or a century, but you've got 2 or 3 or 4,000 years and nobody's got any evidence, the probability is that absence of evidence is evidence itself of the absence of whatever they're believing in. And so if you believe flat out and make the statement there is no such thing as rebirth and reincarnation, you're probably a whole lot closer to reality than those who are certain that it does exist, and they've got no evidence at all that it does.
Why not have no belief in either way? Why not believe
but that's the whole point,
matter.
is it doesn't matter. Even whether you believe or not, the question is, do you start then having correct practice? Because people cannot believe one way or the other and not have a good practice. And so they go around miserable, but they're still determined to tell you that they don't know whether rebirth and reincarnation exist or not, but in a way they do believe it, because they're putting up with a whole bunch of stuff. They're having a whole lot of dukkha in their lives, and they're not actually then taking the right effort to change that. So what I'm actually saying is that those who firmly believe in rebirth and reincarnation are the ones who are unlikely to practice correctly. But having no belief at all, one can not practice. And one can be absolutely firmly in the belief that there is no such thing as rebirth and reincarnation, and they still don't practice. But the ones who have no belief, or that they believe solidly that there is no rebirth and reincarnation, they're the ones then that have the point, well, if I'm going to get anywhere, I got to do it now, because there is no later. And with that point of view, they come to the point of practicing like their hair is on fire, because in their regard, it literally is. There is no tomorrow. We've only got today. We've only got this life to practice. Let's do it now. And so those who have no belief in rebirth and reincarnation, or solidly believe that it doesn't exist, they're the ones who are much more likely, if they run across it, the Dhamma, that they'll start practicing correctly. That those who believe solidly in rebirth and reincarnation will say, yeah, there's the Buddha, but I'll wait until later. And then I've heard the story, which is a very strange story indeed, and that is that when I believe in rebirth and reincarnation, and I see that I've got not just dukkha in this life, but dukkha in the next, and the dukkha in the next, and the dukkha in the next. That should be motivation, strong motivation enough to start practicing in this life. Some people hold that belief, but I've seen people who hold that belief who are really not practicing because they still think that, oh, I can put it off. I can practice a little bit. But when there's an emergency that I've got to go do it now because now is the only shot I've got at it, those are the ones who are most likely going to practice correctly and get the best results.
So it seems like having the correct belief systems to enable you to have the best practice is the most important thing. The beliefs are relevant. Having the mindset, I don't know what you can call it, mindset of the right practice is the most important thing, rather than
precisely the beliefs are irrelevant until the beliefs become important, and then they'll prevent one from practicing correctly.
Yes.
But ultimately, it's correct practice that will get results. And whatever you believe, that in fact, correct practice will bring you out of beliefs. Correct practice is, in fact, being able to see reality as it is, not some story about reality, because absence of evidence is actually evidence of absence. If you've got no evidence at all that it exists, then why believe in it? That what the Buddha's talking about is that let's take the time to look at the reality of what's happening within the mind. Let's look at what the reality of the situation is. And the reality of the situation is that everything happens right now and there's not much future to it. You're either practicing correctly right now or you're not. And practicing in the future is not. So, in fact, you could go so far as to say anything that you believe that you have no evidence of is going to prevent you from doing practice correctly. So, coming out of beliefs and not believing in anything, therefore, you're going to continue to investigate and investigate and investigate to figure out what's real, what's not. But if I believe something exists, then I probably will not investigate very well. That's actually a clear example of that you can see in computer science and programming and whatnot. That if you believe a variable is correct and still your program doesn't work, and you go do all kinds of things to try to fix it because you believe that that variable was correct, but if you test that variable, you'll find out that, oh, that was where the problem was all along. So even in coding, you could also say that's in automobile mechanics, same thing. Oh, the carburetor is fine. It's got to be the electrical system. And so I'm working on the electrical system for 4 days because I never bothered to make sure that the carburetor was good. And now that I go and check the carburetor, I find out that, hey, it doesn't matter how much sparking is done, there's no gas.
So it seems like resisting what arises is the thing that inhibits.
Yeah, our beliefs inhibit our investigation.
Right. That, yeah. Well, satisfaction inhibits. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know the right word for it. Yeah, inhibits whatever there is here. I don't know, whatever is here.
Mm-hmm.
Inhibits it somehow.
And so the better thing to do then is to keep testing everything. Keep looking, keep investigating, and don't believe anything is particularly true or not.
Yeah.
And so, not sure is always the best answer. Not
Yeah.
sure. Don't know. And in fact, that's that phrase "not sure" was one of Bhikkhu Ajahn Po's words that he would use on a regular basis to point out to me that I may think that I know something, but the reality is that I'm not sure.
I think it's important to make a distinction here between the relative truth of not being sure. You know, you can't know everything, and then also accepting the imperfection of not knowing and still being able to say things and communicate. Because I remember I got incredibly confused because I used to just think, oh, I don't know anything. I'm nothing. You can't know anything, so I can't even, say anything or know what anything is. And it just led to absolute confusion. So I think at one level, yes, that you're right, but at another relative level, there is some truth in saying something or understanding something, even though you don't fully know
All
it,
right.
but you understand it at a relative level. Yeah.
Okay. Well, now here's something that we can put into that mix, and that is that whether you know something or not know something, whether you're sure or not sure about it, you can still be happy. You don't have to have some information. You don't have to have some knowledge. You don't have to have some particular item or maybe even a skill. You can just relax. And yet, in our society, we're supposed to know. And so people can't relax if they don't know. And often, because they don't know and it's dangerous for them to not know, they'll make something up. We do that on a regular basis. That's where religions come from. Religions are made up because the people don't like not knowing. The question is, can you not know and still be okay, still be fine?
Yeah. And I think the key here is to seeing that everything is dependent on everything else, right?
Maybe. In some cases, that's true. But in other cases, I mean, everything is interdependent. But, and you've heard this, that the butterfly that is flapping its wings on the tree of southern Mexico can cause a storm in Colorado. And that's the example that they use, but nobody's sure of that. Nobody's sure that the butterfly leaf flapping is going to have any effect at all other than the air that's moving around the flapping butterfly wings. And guess what? Even whether the butterfly has any effect upon the storm in Colorado or not, I could still be happy that that's irrelevant. Even if there's a storm in Colorado, that's irrelevant. I can still be happy. Even if I'm in Colorado in the storm, I can still be happy. The storm in Colorado is irrelevant.
Interesting. So how does that tie into the idea of dependent origination? Is that something we should examine or not even worth looking
Well,
at
the
in your opinion?
dependent origination is actually a step-by-step sequence of events that some things are dependent. For instance, your feelings are not dependent upon what you see in the outside world directly. There's various steps between. So you see, and then you make sense of it in perception, and the perception is going to be using old data, because how can you perceive of what something is if you've got nothing to compare it to at all? And then we make a story. And then we listen to the story, or we have the story, and that story then is what impacts us, not what we actually saw. This is the state of dependent origination that the Buddha is talking about. That it's not a matter of see, feel, it's a matter of see, process old data, make up a story, and then feel. That's the sequence of dependent origination.
So it's like the dependent processes that are occurring within oneself or within one state of consciousness, rather than depending anything external like the butterfly in the storm that's not even related. It's just internal.
Right, that's irrelevant. This butterfly and the storm are irrelevant. The relevance is can I tell myself, can I perceive a story that winds me up in good feelings, or do I have to perceive or make up a story that I feel bad? And one of the stories that people make up is, oh, well, I have to find out if that butterfly is actually causing the storm in Colorado. And if I don't know that, I'm going to feel bad because I got to know. And so it's a matter of how we perceive things. And it's quite possible that someone can feel good without even knowing what a butterfly is. It's possible that we don't even know whether there's storms in Colorado. We don't even know what is a Colorado, and we can still be happy. That we can make our own choices about cause and effect.
So once we're happy, let's say we are already happy. We're happy.
I'm
Is
sorry, what
there,
was that?
we're already happy. What further is there in the Dharma? Once you're satisfied, once you're happy, is there any value in, I don't know, more continued practice or more advanced practice, or does it end there, you think?
Actually, we can go back to the original point of the teaching of the Buddha, where he says he only teaches one thing. He only teaches one thing, both formally and now. He teaches one thing, and that is dukkha, dukkha nirodha. Now, that's in the Dhammapada. It's in Sutra number 22. It's in a couple of places in the Anguttara Nikaya, and it's even in the Samyutta Nikaya. And the Buddha says, I teach only one thing, dukkha, dukkha nirodha. So it's dependent that we are able to see dukkha in order to get out of its way. For instance, a child playing on the railroad tracks can be ignorant of a train coming, and because of that, he gets run over. But there can be an adult that's down the track and can see the child playing on ignorantly on the train tracks and run and grab that child just in time so that the child is not killed by the train. All right, now why am I telling that story? It's that the person who saved the child was not ignorant of the dukkha, of the possibility of the danger. He could see the danger, and because of he could see the danger, he could act. And so in that story, then, the train that's coming is going to be death. And the child playing on the tracks is going to see the train not as death, but as just an adventure because he believes in rebirth and reincarnation. Okay, let the train kill me, and then I'll go off and live a future life. And that the guy who's saving the child sees that, oh no, this life is important. Therefore, he rushes to grab the child and take him off the tracks. This is, in fact, a good Dhamma teacher. Is grabbing that child and taking him off the tracks before the train runs him down because the child is ignorant of the dangers of that train. This is why eventually we can't just let everybody believe in rebirth and reincarnation, because if the whole planet believes in rebirth and reincarnation, then where's the correct practice? There's not any. That's exactly what you could say about Christianity. So long as people believe in heavens and hells after life, they're not actually practicing correctly the teachings of Jesus in this life. But when they see the results of not practicing correctly, for instance, Jesus says to be a good neighbor. And yet Christianity teaches not what Jesus teaches, they teach racial hatred. The southern part of the United States is extraordinarily racist, and they don't even know it. They'll claim we're not racist, while in fact they're making one racist statement and one racist thought after another, because they're ignorant of how much harm they're doing to themselves and others, rather than taking care of their neighbors.
There's a practice called metta, loving kindness meditation.
Yes.
Do you have thoughts or
here's the problem with that. Metta is not a practice, according to the Buddha. Metta is the result of correct practice.
So you shouldn't try to do metta. You shouldn't try to engage in that.
Well,
it should just come naturally.
If you're having good, wholesome, happy thoughts, you can label that metta. But there is another kind of thing that's even bigger metta. You probably heard it. An example would be, may all beings be happy.
Yeah.
May all beings be free from suffering. You've heard that kind of metta before, right?
Yep.
What that assumes is the whole world is unhappy, including you. May all beings be happy, even me, is just wishful thinking. But if you are happy, then you can spread your joy to others, and that's real metta. Real metta is friendliness, kindness. And the way that metta is taught by losers, for losers, to practice losing. By saying, may all beings be happy, you're preventing yourself from being happy right then and there. Then, in fact, that's what gives rise to that stupid bodhisattva vow that may all beings be enlightened before me. And now you have 10,000 people making that vow, and they managed to get everybody enlightened except for the last 10,000, and now you're going to have a great big brawl. They're going to brawl with each other. They're going to fight. Get in there so I can get in last. I'm better than you. You go first. And you can see the ridiculousness of that kind of belief system. What you can say is that there's no gate that's a one-way street, that I can go in and pleasure and have enlightenment, and then I can come back outside of the gate and teach somebody to come in. And then I can go back in, and then I can come out and teach and then go back in. But saying that all beings have to go through the gate and stay there, and I can't go in because I'm too busy grabbing people by the collar and throwing them in. That's not much metta, because most people, they don't even want to be enlightened. They don't want to go in. They're too busy believing in rebirth. Oh, I can't do it now. I got to wait.
So if one were to have thoughts that are loving to other people, in a sense, the correct practice of metta, would that be saying everybody is happy, everybody, or what would it be? But
you can't do that. You're going to be constantly and completely disappointed, because you can't make anybody happy. The question is, can you make yourself happy? And if you can, then can you spread that joy to others and give them the choice as to whether they're going to use your joy to be happy or not? But if you demand them to be happy, or you won't be happy, then you're going to wind up being unhappy because you can't make anybody do anything. This is the whole point of the second noble truth, is everyone makes their own dukkha. They do it through ignorance. And so you can't make anybody happy. In fact, that's a major problem with Western Buddhism, is believing in the kind of stuff rather than seeing that it's an individual practice. And you've got to practice, you've got to get your own act together, because you can't help anybody if you go south, because they won't go north.
So maybe a better thing to think in your mind could be, and I'll get your thoughts on this, I spread joy to myself and others.
All right.
Would that be reasonable to have in the mind? I spread joy to myself. Okay.
But why not just have the thought, I can spread joy to myself, and let the leftovers go to others?
Why does it have to be leftovers?
Because if you don't have an overflowing left over to joy, then you've got nothing to give. You've got to be overflowing with joy. And they've got the leftovers. Okay. If you've got only 50% joy and you go out and try to help two people, you're going to wind up with no joy at all. They'll rob you of your joy. You've got to be able to be joyful and more joyful and overflowing with joyful, not just successful with joy, but wealthy with joy. Because if you're not wealthy with joy, there's going to be all of these places that's going to go steal your joy from you. You've got to remain wealthy, even though you've got all of these thieves who are going to steal your joy. So you can't say, I'm going to have joy and then spread it to others, because you can't spread it to others. All you can do is show them your joy. And it's up to them to become joyful.
That's a great mindset.
Right, that it's up to each one of us. There's no such thing as a big boat where everybody. There's no such thing. Everybody's got to take their own responsibility, where they've got to practice right here, right now. Practice like your hair is on fire. Practice that you can have joy. And it doesn't matter how wealthy with joy that you are, you're not going to make the whole world joyful. You're just one person. There's 7 billion unhappy warriors out there that are out there to kill each other. So and you can't change them. But you can be happy anyway.
So a lot of Buddhists, do chanting and maybe the Heart Sutra, these different types of chants. Do you think it's not valuable?
The Buddha did not teach the Heart Sutra. The Buddha did not teach that. What he taught was the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Noble Path. All of that Heart Sutra and all of that Mahayana and all of that kind of stuff came centuries after the Buddha.
So did the Buddha ever teach chanting, or chanting was added later? He never taught it.
Well, the chanting was the only way to teach students in the first place. And so the chanting was done in the time of the Buddha. The point is not did they chant. The point is what did they chant? And the Heart Sutra was not chanted in the time of the Buddha. That Heart Sutra came much later, and so now later people are chanting a later sutta.
So what did they chant?
Sorry, what?
So what did they chant?
I don't understand you.
So what did they chant? What were they chanting?
What were they chanting? Well,
Yeah.
much of what they were chanting came out of the Sutta Nipata, because the Majjhima Nikaya didn't even exist until the death of the Buddha. So what they were chanting was stuff out of the Sutta Nipata, out of the Udana, and the other things out of the Kundana Nikaya. That in fact some of the chanting was made up by the Theragatha, the monks and the nuns. The Theragatha and the Theragatha were early documents. People were doing that in the time of the Buddha. And so the very early stuff is actually quite good.
So if they were it sounds to me like they were chanting the Buddhist text, which we could just read or speak orally. What's the benefit of chanting them over just saying them, over just speaking them like we're speaking words now?
Well, originally, that was the way to teach the Dhamma. Now, there are problems with chanting. One is that the chanting is done in a foreign language, which leaves it to be magical and mystical. And in fact, you probably heard that when the Catholic Church changed their liturgy from Latin into English, that the Catholic Church took a nosedive. It was actually better for it to be chanted in a foreign language because that helped keep the faith. Now, in the time of the Buddha, the chanting was done in the language that the people understood. And so they chanted and they memorized it. And after they memorized it, then it was explained to them so that they would understand it rather than just merely chanting and that's it. No, the chanting was done so that the student would know the Dhamma, and then later his teacher would go through that sutta of the chanting and explain to him all of the details of it. That was the style. But modern chanting has problems to it because even those who know the chants don't understand what they're chanting. They don't even know the Pali language.
So the real benefit is the memory retention. It's to help you learn, it seems like. To chant is to improve your memory so you can remember it.
Well, that role is fulfilled nowadays by books. But in the time of the Buddha, they didn't have books. Even if they had it written down, it was written just one copy of it, and it wasn't widely distributed. That the way that they distributed data was by having the students chant it and memorize it.
Hmm.
And the memorization came first, and then the understanding comes later. Just like the difference between a scientific article that's in a scientific journal, the guy who wrote it and the peers that reviewed it understood what it was that was written down. Everybody else is reading, trying to understand from the words. So there's a difference between the literature and understanding the literature. Just like there's a difference between understanding the chanting versus knowing the chant. And so modern chanting has a big problem because the people who are doing the chanting often don't know the language, let alone what the actual meaning of the words are, let alone the actual understanding of the teaching. And so so there you go with the Heart Sutra. And in fact, you can tell the difference between in the Pali, the old stuff is called a sutta, and the Heart Sutra is got that Sanskrit in it. It's not in Pali. It's got that R in the sutra, as opposed to the word sutta. So the Heart Sutra is new stuff. It's done by ordinary people who really didn't understand the teaching of the Buddha. And the real understanding of the Buddha is that second noble truth is that it's your own ignorance, it's your own ill will, it's your own greed that is causing your own disappointments.
Yep. Different
And
topic.
that means that you can't fix anybody. Only they, if they hear how they're being, how they're disappointing themselves, can they make a change. But in fact, I've described this to you several times, and you haven't come up with a great big smile. Aha, oh, I see it. No, you're still in that state of confusion and trying to figure it out.
No, I'm not.
Well, I can see it on your face now that I said that. Now you're smiling.
No, I'm smiling, but I wasn't in a state of confusion before. I knew what you were saying.
Okay.
I was just trying to
You can defend
ask
yourself if you want to. That's all right.
I don't care either. I was just curious about when I was traveling. I went to Singapore and Thailand, and there are a few places that had the Buddha's relics, which are these little orbs, and various
Catholic
temples.
Church is full of relics too, and the Catholic Church has got more relics than the Buddhists have. And what good are those relics from the Catholics?
Yeah,
You can have a little piece of the cross. You got a Buddha too. So what? That's just bragging rights.
Yeah, you're right. I'm just wondering what if you know what they're what they're made out of, because they're like little balls. Have you seen them?
All
Really,
of
like,
those things are made up. They're ordinary people trying to cling to something, wanting some relic or another to make them happy.
Sure.
And so the guy gains great joy by having that relic, and then he loses it. And now how is he going to feel?
Well, only if it's attached to a relic.
Right. So if it's the relic that makes him happy and he loses that relic, where's his joy? Where's his happiness there?
He can still be joyful without it.
Right. That's the whole point. If he could be joyful without that relic, then why are we having relics?
Oh, he might like the look of it.
Well, you might like the look of it, but when you think that it's got value,
Something could have value and you could like it, but you could also not be attached to it. Like, I like this water bottle, but if I lose it, I don't care. It's just a water bottle. I
yeah.
can get a new one.
All right.
I'm not
How many water bottles do you know of that are enshrined in holy temples? How many water bottles ordain the walls of cathedrals? No, there's a difference between a water bottle and those relics. Those relics are revered.
Yeah, they
And
are.
what if that water bottle was well known to have been the water bottle that the Buddha carried around? Now, the fact that the Buddha carried that bottle around is much more important than the water bottle itself.
Yes.
That's a relic. So you change the topic from relic to water bottles, and I caught you there.
It depends on how you view it, and if you feel like you'll lose something if you don't have it anymore.
Well, of course, that's the whole point, is stop looking at it like that and stop depending upon the relics and whatnot and just be happy.
Oh,
Another kind of relic would be the relic of knowledge. Oh, I know all of the sutras. I memorized this, that, and the other thing. Or maybe I've got all of the Pali, or maybe I've got this and that. And you have a whole bunch of Western translators that are getting very famous for doing this Majjhima Nikaya or that Dingha Nikaya. That doesn't make them happy just because they've done the translation. That in fact, translators are often miserable people. Why are they miserable? Because they haven't finished the translation yet. And so they're very much in a hurry. They want to get it done. Amazon is knocking on their door. Where's that translation you promised us? And all of it had to do with, from the original, of wanting to know. When in fact, most of the stuff that's called Buddhist literature is irrelevant. We don't need to know any of that kind of stuff. What we need to know is Dukkha Dukkha Nirodha. What we need to know is the whole teaching of the Buddha in a nutshell. Just enough to take the right effort to come out of the unwholesome thoughts of wanting to know, wanting a relic, wanting things that we don't have, and just be happy. Just to come out of all that desire, just be happy.
Yeah. But once you're happy, you can still read if you want to.
Pardon?
Once you're happy, you can still read if you want to.
Yeah, but there's no need to. That's the whole point, is you come out of all your needs and wants and desires, then anything and everything is a game. It's a joy, it's a choice. It's an easy, happy thing. You can read or not read, you're okay.
Yep.
But for the most people, they need to know, and so they read looking for something, and they wind up confused and unhappy because they're not practicing correctly. If you're practicing correctly, you don't need anything. And so after you practice correctly and you've got your beauty, your joy, your wisdom, then everything's just a toy. Everything's just a game. You can do it. Have fun at it.
Hmm. I got this book here. The Bhikkhu Buddhadasa's book on dependent origination.
Okay.
You read?
I've got it around here someplace. I
Oh,
certainly
yeah,
got it
too.
online.
They have like artwork, like I've seen this a lot.
That's a Tonka.
Oh, okay. What is it?
Well, it's a Tibetan Tonka. If you look at it, you'll see that there is a lion, or not a lion, a bear that is holding a disc.
A bear that's holding a disc.
A bear that's holding a disc in his teeth.
He's a bear. So is he a protected deity like the Malakala deity they have in Tibet?
I'm not sure I understand what you're saying.
Is he like a type of protector deity like a Malakala they have in Tibet?
Well, Bhikkhu Buddhadasa uses that only as a memory aid, that every little picture on it is actually a metaphor.
Yeah.
And that there is nothing about that Tonka that's of any value. It's not magical. It doesn't mean a thing. But at Wat Suan Mokkh, they've got a lot of them. There's one in one Dhamma hall. There's a big one in the spiritual theater. They have one at the International Dhamma Hermitage, and they have a deeper one. So they've got a lot of those.
I guess it's fun. It's inspiring, right? To have some nice artwork.
I'm sorry?
It's
What?
fun. It's inspiring. It's inspiring to have some fun artwork. Yeah.
For some people, yeah.
Yeah.
A better inspiration would be got it. I understand those 12 steps of the dependent origination. I even know the Pali. So that Tonka means nothing. But for some people, it means something. For Bhikkhu Buddhadasa, it was merely a representation. And for somebody who was writing the book, they put it on the cover.
Yeah.
Which has several reasons to it. One is that Bhikkhu Buddhadasa is unconcerned with the difference between Mahayana and Theravada. But that's a Tonka. It's a Tibetan symbol. And all of the little symbols on it are just metaphors. For instance, if you look at 11 o'clock, you'll see the image of a pregnant woman. Maybe it's 10 o'clock. Look at 10 o'clock.
Oh, yeah. I see it.
Mm-hmm. Yes, so that's the image of the Bhavana, which is actually what it represents is that we concoct things, we make stuff up. It's the becoming of me, the self, and it's the self that hurts. If there's no selfishness, there's no hurting. The dukkha has a self, and the Bhavana is the creation of that.
So it's almost like. Oh, sorry.
All right, and so they used an image of Bhavana as the pregnant woman, and then a whole lot of people will see that Tonka and say, oh, they mean that there are 3 lives in Paticca Samuppada. And that's an actual pregnancy. There are people who believe that. They don't see it as a metaphor. That's where the Visuddhimagga comes up with, in fact, 3 lifetimes in the cycle of Paticca Samuppada. But it's just a metaphor of how the mind winds up in dukkha.
I feel like a lot of this misunderstanding could have been resolved if the Buddha and people after him just put this is a metaphor, do not take this literally before they.
He often did. He often says this is a simile. This is a metaphor. There's one sutta in particular where he says that the mind is so fast. The mind is fast, monks. It is so fast, I don't even have an analogy for how fast the mind is, which indicated that he used analogies often. And people believe the analogies to be true. Just like the Christians think of Adam and Eve as the first people, to where really it's just a story about how humanity destroys the paradise. And so the Christians get all hung up in the symbols, and they've got talking snakes, and the woman did it first, and it was an apple they ate, and it was a fig leaf that they were wearing, and God threw them out of the Garden of Eden, and nothing like that actually is in the Bible. That if you want to look at the symbolism is the snake is a symbol of wisdom. And what they ate of was the fruit of knowledge, like the fruit of the loom, the fruit of your loins, the fruit of your labor. The fruit here means result. And what was the result? They ate of the fruit of knowledge of good and evil, so that they had knowledge of this is good and this is bad. And they went around paradise saying this part of paradise is good and that part of paradise is bad. And in the process, they destroyed paradise because it wasn't good now, or it wasn't just paradise. Now it's good and bad and good and bad. So they destroyed the paradise by judging it, by having the knowledge of good and evil. So it's all just a metaphor. And yet the Christians, they think that it's got some literal thing to it. Well, there's a whole lot of stupid people in the world, and not all of them are Christians. There's a whole lot of really stupid people who want to be Buddhist. And they'll take all of these analogies, instead of getting the point and the metaphor, they'll believe the analogy. They'll believe the story. They'll believe the simile.
Definitely, for sure.
So
anyway,
that's the answer to your question was that why didn't the Buddha say that he's using stories and analogies and whatnot? The answer to that was he certainly did. But that doesn't mean that people want to believe that this is an analogy, that this is a simile, that this is a metaphor. They want it to be real. And so they get confused. This is where all that belief system comes from.
Yeah.
And the practice itself is really easy. There's nothing to it. You don't have to read all them books. You just recognize that you create your own misery. That you see something and then you perceive it to the point that you have the feelings that wind up in a state of misery. And you made it up. That making up process is called perception. And when you stop making stuff up, you stop having feelings about stuff.
Definitely.
Then there's nothing left but joy. That feeling of safe, secure, aha, I've got it. That's what we're left with. Rather than I like it and I want it, which is the feelings. You've already got it. So I don't have to like it and want it. I've got it.
Well, thank you so much for chatting today. I really appreciate your time.
Pardon?
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for chatting today. I really appreciate your time.
Well, I'm hoping that you can take that and mull it over and figure it out and recognize that almost all your dukkha is manufactured because you want stuff. And when you don't want anything, then you're happy as a lark.
Yep. Perfect.
All right. So we'll see you later.
See you next time. Thank you.
You're welcome. I'm glad
Have a
you
good
got
day.
something out of it. Good.
Bye.